Hey guys, in today's video, we're going to be taking a deep dive into the 2018 Senate election in the state of Ohio, give our analysis on how things are shaping up right now, and giving a prediction on who we see winning this Senate seat in these midterm elections. So starting off here, the Democrat incumbent, Sherrod Brown, he's getting a challenge from Republican Jim Renacci. The state of Ohio, it can be purple. It's in general a little bit maybe more to the Republican leaning side, and we saw that in this past presidential election where Donald Trump was able to beat Hillary Clinton by a rather significant margin, more than you might expect. I believe it was about 8 percentage points. You compare that back to 2012 and 2008, where both of those years Ohio, by a slim margin, went for the Democrat Barack Obama. But a purple state in presidential elections and in non-presidential years, it definitely tends to be in a more Republican direction. But Sherrod Brown, he's got that incumbency advantage, and we'll see that play out as we look through these polls. So a couple of polls that just came out have the incumbent Democrat ahead by 17 and 16 points respectively. So great numbers there for Brown, and he's already getting over 50% of the vote. He's got overwhelming name recognition, and we'll see that as we dive deeper into specifically this Quinnipiac poll. There is a number of really interesting numbers that I want to go over and why it looks so great for the Democrats. So first I'm going to touch on that, and then once I go through those numbers in the Quinnipiac poll, I'm going to move on to some of the historical election results, which aren't quite as interesting as this polling data that we're getting, so I'm going to leave that towards the end of the video. So starting off here, going to dive into this Quinnipiac poll. And starting off here, is your opinion of Sherrod Brown favorable or unfavorable, or you haven't heard enough about him? So 48% favorable, 29% unfavorable, a positive 19-point spread there, very positive for Brown, and then 21 haven't heard enough to have an opinion on him. And we compare that over to his challenger, the same question for his challenger, only 22% favorable, 26% unfavorable, so a negative 4-point spread, and then 50% of people haven't heard enough to have an opinion. So this is where name recognition comes into play. Brown, that number was 21 compared to Renacci, who's at 50. A big gap there in notoriety, name recognition, being aware of this politician. And when you don't have that name recognition, it's a tough hill to climb going against an incumbent. We can see that in these numbers here with the favorability of Brown at positive 19, and for Renacci, it's negative 4. Moving on here, we're going to skip over this Kasich one and go to the next Senate question. Do you approve or disapprove of the way Sherrod Brown is handling his job as a U.S. Senator? And this one is extremely impressive. 55% approve compared to just 29% disapprove. So a positive 26% point spread there for Brown is extremely impressive, especially when you compare it over to the Republican senator from the state of Ohio. That same question, Rob Portman, 42% approve compared to 36% disapprove. So only a positive 6 percentage point spread there for the Republican senator from the state of Ohio. That means the Democratic senator has a 20% better gap in terms of how he's handling his job as a senator, which is great news for the Democrats running in the state of Ohio right now up to these midterm elections, that they're viewed so much more favorably right now than the Republicans who have the same job in the Senate. So those were the numbers in terms of these Senate polling questions that were asked, but also just another interesting one. Do you approve or disapprove of how Donald Trump is handling his job as president? A negative 11-point gap there, 43% approve, 54% disapprove. So not great numbers there, especially from a state that voted for Donald Trump by a bigger margin than many were expecting going in to the 2016 election. So with Trump not having tremendous amount of approval in the state of Ohio, also hurts the Republicans going into these midterm elections. So those were the really interesting numbers that I wanted to go over and how they look very good for the Democrats at this point. Now we're going to go into some historical election data, which isn't quite as interesting, specifically because I couldn't find great parallels, but nonetheless, I'm going to be touching on these numbers. So starting off here, Sherrod Brown in 2012, his last election, he was able to win by 6 percentage points, grabbing about 2.7 million votes. And this was a presidential year, which tends to have a more positive effect on Democrats running because you get a bit better turnout from your Democratic voters in a presidential election compared to midterm elections. So Republicans might have been thinking heading into this 2018 midterm, maybe we can pick up the state of Ohio and get a senator from there. But based on the polling data that we're getting, that's definitely not looking like it's going to be the case. And I would be really surprised if Sherrod Brown wasn't able to win his re-election bid by quite a significant bigger margin than this 6-point win that he had back in 2012. Now moving on to the 2018 primary, Jim Renacci, he was able to pick up 360,000 votes, winning with 47.4% overall. And as we can see here, we had 760,000 votes cast in this Ohio primary. I wanted to compare this back to as most recent of a primary that I could find in a midterm election, but then I also compare it back to the 2016 primary. And of course, 2016, a presidential year, you're going to expect significantly better turnout. So again, we had 760,000 votes here in this Republican primary. 2 years ago in the presidential primary, that also had a primary for the Senate, we can see 1.6 million votes cast. So about 900,000 less votes cast just 2 years later in the primary. But again, these numbers are skewed because of it being a presidential year in 2016. So I wanted to find the most recent Senate primary that was in a midterm year, and unfortunately, it's not the most relevant data. I had to go all the way back to 2010, and it was on the Democrat side, and if we add up the primary vote there, it's about 663,000 votes, so just about 100,000 votes different from this Republican primary that we got. But 2010 was a very bad year for Democratic turnout, and in general, midterms for the Democrats isn't necessarily their greatest turnout situation. But like I said, 2010 was more of a wave election on the Republican side as they reclaimed control of the House of Representatives. So bad turnout from Democrats in 2010. And you can see their primary numbers here, 663,000, within striking distance of that 760,000 that we have on the Republican side in 2018 in this midterm election. So that's the voting data that I pulled up and wanted to go over there just for a little bit. But again, guys, based on the polling numbers that we're seeing in this race between Sherrod Brown and Jim Renacci, it's looking tremendous right now for Brown. His favorabilities, his approval are just knocking it out of the park, and his polling, just in terms of the vote, he's up by about 16, 17 points in these last two polls that we got. So, of course, at this point, it's looking very good for Sherrod Brown, and that's where our prediction is going to be, siding with the Democrat incumbent from the state of Ohio to go ahead and keep his Senate seat in 2018. So thanks, guys, for stopping on in for today's video. For more predictions, you can check those out over on our YouTube channel. Subscribe for more, and we hope to see you guys back here for future videos. Bye.